Alleluia, Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.
That went well. Dear sisters and brothers, it is always a privilege and a joy to share a reflection with you and to speak to you as the wonderful congregation you are. But today, that joy overflows in my heart as we celebrate one of the greatest events of our faith. Today, I want to share my first Easter experience with you and what it meant to me 20 years ago as a 14-year-old boy. Yes, I'm 34 if you're doing the math. When I was 8 years old, I moved to live with my great aunt and uncle, whom I deeply loved. After 1 year of living with them, my uncle Francisco passed away. For the first time in my childhood, I experienced the loss of someone very close to me. The way my family explained it to me when they came back from the hospital was very simple. Your uncle went to heaven, so you're not going to see him anymore. To what I replied, oh, he died. Then they said, well, yes, he died. The Hispanic culture in general is very strong about men don't cry. And we are taught that from childhood. So I didn't cry. Not in front of them, not alone. Though I was very much heartbroken with the idea of not seeing him anymore. At that time, I built up a very strong concept of the finality of death. I even wondered, how could they be so sure he went to heaven? But the part of not seeing him anymore was very clear to me, and it felt like a stone on my heart. A stone that was getting heavier as I was getting used to the idea of the finality of death. When I started my Christian life, 4 years after my uncle died, I went through my first Holy Week. I had no problem understanding Good Friday and the passages of the crucifixion. Jesus died, period. I was able to understand that part. I already had my idea of death, so the image of the Christ on the cross was a very real one to me. It was the image of the suffering and sadness that this world carries. I did not question it, except that it made me sad. But as you know, Good Friday is not the end of the story. So when I discovered about Easter using the words of John's Gospel, I was amazed and confused, just like the women were early that Sunday morning. Isn't death the end, as I was told? I had a very hard time believing that at first. It took me a while to deconstruct what I had been taught. But I was also afraid to say anything to my church friends. How could I say I did not fully believe in the resurrection in a place where everybody believes it or seems to believe it? So I kept my doubts in silence. Whenever I had a chance, I asked my pastor and friends about the resurrection event, because with all of my doubts, I wanted to believe. I really wanted. I listened to the Easter passages very carefully, and I slowly started to think, if this is true, this is amazing. Best news ever. And the part of not seeing my uncle anymore is a lie, because Jesus' resurrection broke death, and death will not last forever. All of those and many other ideas walked with me for an entire year. And a new hope started to burn and grow in my heart. So I started to pray God to help me understand the amazing news of the resurrection of His Son, and to forgive my incapacity, not so much to believe, but to accept the Easter news as equally real as the Good Friday was. On my second Easter day, 1998, which I remember as if it were today, there was a beautiful liturgical dance representing the resurrection after the reading of the Gospel. We know in Cuba we can be good at dancing. So there was this beautiful dance representing the resurrection right after the reading of the Gospel, and I suddenly got it. It was real to me. I could not put down in words how I felt. I just got it. I couldn't control myself. I broke into tears like crazy in front of my friends and congregation. I was serving at the altar, and my pastor at that time, who is my father-in-law today, asked, "Are you okay?" It was worse when he asked. I couldn't answer, and instead of saying something, I cried harder. And then he said, "Go to the sacristy and wash your face." And I said, No, I am fine." I was finally crying in front of people, and I didn't care, because the Easter news became real to me. I was filled up with a new hope. That, in my 14-year-old mind, meant that I would see Uncle Francisco again. And yes, he was in heaven, and my family was wrong about not seeing him anymore. And the only thing that didn't look real to me anymore was death. The stone of the finality of death was rolled off my heart, and the emptiness of the tomb on the gospel reading filled my heart with joy. A joy that was coming out of my eyes as tears washing all over all the lies of this world. Today, at 34 years old, I am experiencing the presence of the risen Christ in many different ways. But Easter is essentially a celebration of life, the life of Christ in our own lives, yours and mine, from now and forever. I am sure Easter has a very special meaning for each one of you in your personal relationship with Christ. In my personal journey, I know I will still find new ways to embrace the risen Christ on my pilgrimage. It is impossible to understand the gift of life in all its fullness all at once, because it unfolds and reveals new meaning for us every day. I know I will still be amazed in many more times as I was on my spiritual experience as a 14-year-old. As much as we like reflections here at the Center for Spirituality, I would like for you, as we start Easter this year, to reflect on what Easter means for you, for each one of you. How does it speak to you in your personal story? And what new hope does it bring to you? I pray God for you and for me to continue to find ways to share the meaning of resurrection with those that are still stuck in the temporary reality of death. Those who had never been told that death is not the final answer. Thanks to Christ's resurrection, a new era and a new life has been established. Dear brothers and sisters, let's not hesitate to share the good news of Easter with those among us who need it the most. You know who they are. They are not far. They are our neighbors, friends, and sometimes our own family. They need us to share the Easter. They need us to share what Easter means for us, so they can also experience the love of the risen Christ for themselves. My sisters and brothers, Alleluia, Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.